Okay, so our session is being recorded. I know we have a lot of people joining us tonight, but again, all things will be recorded, all materials will be shared. So if you miss something or something you want to review it again, you'll have access to the recording and the view graphs and everything. So this is your chance to sort of see quickly what's going on. All right, first thing I'm going to do, and I know people say, oh, no, not view graphs. Yes, I'm going to spend a little bit of time, just a few minutes, setting the context. I think it's very important. This is a very unique program, Decisions First, and so it's important to set the context. You say, well, I'm in an analytics program. Why am I looking at a program that doesn't do analytics but frames decisions? So I'll walk you through this very quickly, just a few slides, quick overview and so forth, and then we'll get to it. You'll see plenty of demo. Now remember, you've all heard the first lecture for the first week about decision making, and we all know we're using our textbook in Data610 called Keeping Up with the Quants. And Tom Davenport, one of the legends in the business, of course, says that you need to do three things: frame the problem, and you can see the details on that, solve the problem, communicate the problem. So this first software package is designed to do one thing: frame the problem. And there are many studies out there saying if you don't do a good job of framing the problem, you're probably wasting a lot of your time. You're just spending all kinds of extra time doing things. Let me move some of these windows over a little bit. Doing things that are going to result in no results that make a difference in the organization. So that's why we start with this. Now, Decisions First, what does it do? It frames the problem. That's what it does. And it frames it very thoroughly. I've been trying to find software for many years that does this, and I think this is the best I've ever found. I like the quote from Albert Einstein: if he had 1 hour to save the planet, spend 59 minutes defining, another word for framing, the problem, and 1 minute resolving it. Now, I wouldn't put quite that much emphasis on the framing, but I do think it's extremely important that you frame the problem so everyone knows exactly what it is you're trying to do with your analytics. Everyone knows who's in charge, where you're going to get the information, who's going to provide expertise, what kind of regulations are involved, etc. And you'll see all that when we get into the walk through the actual software. Okay. Mr. Taylor, and I work closely with James on this software, is the creator and owner of the software package, and his philosophy is going to unveil itself here in the next couple of slides. First, as we all know, and this is old news, I'm sure, there are many levels of decision making. Strategic decisions, which are few in number, but have a large impact. Do I build a new product line? Do I build a new plant? Do I move to another country? Tactical decisions, where we talk about perhaps reorganizing the supply chain, changing your net present value, payback period, etc. And then operational decisions. These are the ones we're going to focus on. These are the ones I'm going to focus on. Now, these are day-to-day decisions that affect one transaction or one customer. Each of them has a very, very small impact on the bottom line. But because there are so many of them, collectively, they have a large impact on the bottom line. Okay? So I think it's important that you understand that Decisions First was really designed to help you with the operational decisions. It's also important to remember that's primarily where analytics resides. Analytics doesn't help really. You don't build predictive models for whether you should go to another country. You do build predictive models for what kind of offer you should make a customer who's about to churn, whether a transaction is fraudulent, etc. So this not only is the focus of Decisions First, it's the focus of where we use analytics primarily. So the kinds of problems you should be looking for when you do your assignment and the kinds of problems that Decisions First is best suited for are decisions that meet these criteria: repeatable, non-trivial. In other words, if you can make it without a model, you don't really need one. Measurable business impact. As I said, it might be small for each individual transaction or decision, but collectively makes quite a difference. And finally, a candidate, not always doable, but a candidate for automation, either through business rules or some other analytical technique, perhaps a regression model, a neural network model, more of that downstream. So these are the kinds of things that the decision you're going to outline with Decision First ideally would meet. Okay? Okay. Now we're moving into a little more drill down here, and we're going to get into the software. It basically is based on what we call the decision requirements modeling model. There's something called the decision modeling notation, which has become an accepted standard for decision making, but we're not going to get into that now. But Decisions First does meet those standards. And basically, here's what you want to do. Identify the decision. What's the decision that's going to be impacted by the analytic project? Describe the decisions. What is it exactly? What sub-decisions need to be made? What are the detailed requirements that are necessary to make the decision? So that's what you do in steps 2 and 3, where you'll spend a lot of time. Then you complete the model. You fill in all the missing details. Who's going to do it? When are they going to do it? Why are they going to do it? Now, you won't get to all of that in the short period of time we have to use the software, 2 or 3 weeks, but you certainly will see aspects of that. And then finally, you generate something called an Analytics Requirement Document, ARD. That is the final document that you can pass out to everyone and say, this is what we all agreed to, guys and gals. This is what we're going to do. And then, of course, that gives you an audit trail. It gives you a plan. It gives you all kinds of things. So these are the steps involved in using Decisions First software. These are the steps it will help you with. And if you do those properly, I think you'll be very pleased. Again, this is very unique software. There aren't many other competitor products out there that basically would do what this does. I haven't found any that are as good. So that's the thing. Now, what do you do in the decision? There is some offline work to do. In other words, you're going to select a decision to do for your first assignment that you either have some familiarity with or can do some research to gain some familiarity with it. Because here's what you're going to need to come up with. What decisions are required to support the main decision? You're going to have one main decision. You're going to have subsidiary supporting decisions that need to be made first. And that's almost always true. Then what information do I need? Where am I going to get the data? Where am I going to get the information? What guidelines, policy, expertise, and regulations do I need? What predictive analytic model do I need? Now, we won't do much with this because we haven't studied models yet, but there should be a place for that, and you'll see that. So all of this feeds back in so that when we're done, we have a complete document that outlines very thoroughly what the decision is that's to be made, how it's to be made, who's going to make it, what kinds of information flows we need, where the expertise, the regulations, et cetera, fit in, where the analytics piece fits in, et cetera. And I think that's a big accomplishment. You will see in a moment when I open up Decisions First a screen that looks something like this. Rectangle blocks are decisions. Okay, it's a very simple kind of process, actually. These ovals are information sources, and this other shape with the truncated, curvy bottom, these are sources of expertise, regulations, etc. And what you do is connect those to show the influence of these things, and then fill in some details on these things. So you'll see how that works once we get in and start using the model. So these are the high-level requirements. Again, you're going to have to do some work offline to think through your problem before you just start slapping shapes on the screen. But as they pull that together, and of course it can be iterative, you can pull some shapes in, save it, come back later and say, you know, I need to add a source of information. I need to add a source of expertise, and add more. Or add sub-sources that fit into these sources, as you'll see in a moment. So you'll start filling in the pieces. Notice how we have lots of pieces here. Some of them aren't connected to anything, so they're on the screen, but we haven't thought through yet perhaps how to connect those, where they have influence. Okay, and this will be your basic menu to do that. Again, you'll see all this once I open up the software here in just a couple of minutes. Now, as you begin to add more context and detail, you begin to show things connected. For example, these we now know, because they're rectangles, are decisions. Why are they down below the main decision? And if you've watched James Taylor's thorough 45-minute walkthrough, which is much more detailed than what I'm going to do tonight, you will see this is his tutorial model. And you say, you know, before I can select a marketing offer to give to a customer who might be leaving my company, I have to check the offer timing. I have to determine what products I can offer him or her, and I have to determine what the value would be. Can't just offer them a blank check. So you can see that these decisions are subsidiary to the main decision. This is the main one I'm trying to make. What kind of marketing offer should I give to a customer who looks like they're about to churn, meaning leave the company? Is that a decision that's repeatable? Yes, happens a lot, especially phone companies, banks, etc. Is it a decision that's non-trivial? Yes. You can see already from these pieces there are a lot of things that have to be considered before I can make the offer. Is it a decision that affects the bottom line? Yes. Every time I select and make a marketing offer, it takes a little chunk out. Maybe I give them free texting or extra data storage or something. So it does affect the bottom line. And can it be automated? Well, perhaps. Does it have an analytics aspect? Yes. Because I have to determine which customers are likely to churn, for example. So certainly I recommend you watch Mr. Taylor's very thorough walkthrough, 45 minutes long. But I'm going to do a much simpler and give you a few more tips here tonight, some things he doesn't include. Now, by the way, each of these objects, and I'll call them what they are, objects, different shapes, different meanings, you can drill down on them and fill out the details, and should. For example, if one of my objects is determine refund eligibility, here's a description of that. Further, I can go further down and put in what kinds of information go with that. What's the question I'm trying to answer with this decision? Okay? What's the allowed answer types? Is it yes, no? Is it a value from an explicit list? And I'm going to show you some of this. How complex? What are the characteristics of the decision? And how is it connected to other things, like who in the organization is responsible? What systems does it affect? Lots of things there. So there's a lot more depth than meets the eyes when you first start using Decisions First. Again, you won't have enough time to fully become totally expert gee whiz with Decisions First. You will have enough time in the next couple of weeks to learn a lot about it, to use it, and to practice with it. And of course, practice is the key to becoming very good at it. And I would also encourage you to keep in mind that when you get to the practicum, 670, I know that seems a long way off. When you get to the practicum, this might be a very useful software package if you're going to do something for your real organization. If you're going to try to build an analytics model, first thing to do is frame it. Now, this is Mr. Taylor's tutorial walkthrough with added just a few little tidbits to tell you some of the things. So I'm not going to spend time on that because if you go through his very detailed tutorial, you will see how he pieces together all of these things. But look how many decisions are connected to other decisions, and before you know it, you got it. And of course, there's a piece down here. There should be a piece in analytics in every one of these models. Now, you don't have to flesh that out yet because we haven't even talked about the types of analytics models, but, you know, some sort of a model, some sort of analytics model, be it a predictive model, a dashboard, or something, should be in this decision to support what we're trying to do. Here it's going to be a customer churn likelihood. Before we can make a marketing offer, we want to just first determine which customers are most likely to churn. Those are the ones we want to make the offer to. So that's sort of the brief background. Now, here's the example I'm going to spend some time with. This is a different problem. This is one you haven't seen before. The decision here is whether to hold or sell a distressed mortgage. You know, we have a lot of banks and mortgage companies who have lots of mortgages, and occasionally they think, oh, I got to get out from under this one, sell it. Maybe I can collateralize it and get rid of it, make a little money on it, or get rid of it before it becomes in default. This model was built by a UMUC student. It's pretty good. In fact, it's used in Mr. Taylor's document called Framing Analytical Requirements. And you can see the source, University of Maryland, University College, and Decisions First. So it's a very good example, and I'm going to walk you through a few pieces of that. I'm not going to build the whole thing, but I'll show you how to build that. So when you get all done, you've got an end result. You've got a framed document. It's got KPIs, knowledge performance indicators. You've got the analytics included, the decisions, the application context, et cetera, et cetera. If you had enough time, you'd be able to get all these pieces into software. A couple of slides, and again, I'm not going to go through these because they'll be made available to you. But as you know by now, you should have, or will soon have, your login to DecisionsFirst software. This is the address where you go to log in. Notice that it does require one-time installation of a little add-in called Silverlight, which is not, emphasized, not supported by Chrome. So I would use IE, well, you have to use IE or Firefox. And supposedly the Mac user Safari is recommended, although some people say others perhaps work as well. I use IE. I don't have as much luck with Firefox. I do have great luck with Internet Explorer. So that's your first little tip. Again, this complete walkthrough is Mr. Taylor's 45-minute walkthrough of the software. Very thorough, but a little more beyond what we're doing tonight. And then a very good source are these DecisionFirst video tutorials on specific aspects. Now let me show you what that page looks like in case you haven't been to it yet. Let's see, where is it? Oops, I got it open here somewhere. Oh, I know where it is. It's over here. These tutorial videos are very good. They're short. They walk you through the pieces. You can see they're very current. Most of them were done within the last 6 months. So again, if you say, gee, I want to know how to do business context, I want to know how to edit objects, I want to know how to use collaboration. We're not going to do a team assignment, so you won't need the collaboration. But if you're curious, there is a nice collaboration feature. I want to know how to build a decision requirements diagram, I want to know how to do search, etc. Those are all right there in that aspect. So they're very useful. Extremely useful. I find them extremely useful. Additional help, okay. If you have any problems, well, first of all, these are articles, written tutorials. Some people would rather see a written tutorial, and so forth. So there's a lot of links here. If you do have problems with the software, we do have support from DecisionsFirst. You should send your problem with whatever screenshots you can include to support@decisionsfirst.com, and I'll put that link in the links coming down. As you know, you have an assignment due at the end of week 3. We are just now starting week 2, so you have 2 full weeks to deal with this, which should be plenty of time. And what you're trying to do, obviously, is accomplish 2 goals. You're trying to show that you understand the concept of framing and how important it is, and you're trying to show that you can implement and use DecisionsFirst software. So it is a trade-off between grasping the use of the software and being able to be thorough in your framing. And now we finally reached the point where we're going to do a walkthrough. We'll come back and talk about questions and answers. And as I mentioned earlier, if you have problems with the software, support@decisionsfirst.com. Okay, let me switch over to the login screen for DecisionsFirst Modeler. Okay, you can see the address where you go to log in. Again, all you need to log in is your email and your password, which will be provided to you or have been provided to you already, hopefully, or soon, by your faculty member. Okay, now I've got lots of accounts with DecisionsFirst. So I'm trying to remember which one. I'm going to use the one that logs me in as a student because I think that's the view you all would like to see. Okay, I have accounts where I'm faculty, I have accounts where I'm a student, and so forth. Okay, this should be the right login. Okay, there we are. You're going to see the same screen. You're going to see the same screen. Another little footnote or sidebar. When you go through Mr. Taylor's tutorial, he's going to show one more icon up here than you have. It's called Admin. Admin is used by the faculty. It does 2 things. It allows you to enter into the database. Okay, so you can use the software. And it allows you, the faculty members should run what we call an API key so that you can print out your answer in Word. More on that later. You won't have to do a thing to do that. That's done by the faculty member. Okay, so if we look at the drawing or the model that I'm going to try to recreate, you can see that this was a model designed to talk about whether you should hold or sell distressed mortgages. So let's see if we can start with that. Now, what is that? let me show you the menu first. That's a decision requirements diagram. This that you're looking at. This whole thing is called the DRD, a decision requirements diagram. This, of course, is the decision. Remember, there are several kinds of things you can do. Decision. There's an objective, input, knowledge source, process, event, system, organization, data set, analytic effort, widget, and new report. You won't use all of those, but you will use, of course, some of them heavily. So, of course, we have to start by saying I want to create a new decision requirements diagram. Now you'll have to get used to a little bit of the, let me go ahead and close these for now. We'll come back to questions and chat later. I want to have the full screen available. You know, these are tabs up here, so I can go back and forth. There's the home screen, there's a decision. Every time you click on something, you'll open up a new tab. You can edit your profile if you want. We don't need to do that now. Okay, so I'm starting a new diagram. I've already given it quite a bit of thought, and I know that the first thing I want to put in there, my main decision is whether to hold or sell distressed mortgages. Well, what is that? That's a decision. So I put that over here. You'll notice it just has a blank entry. It needs to be named. This is the name for the diagram, by the way, and this is the name for the node. This is the node. The diagram, I should give that a name. So this is a model, a decision model. Let me get rid of some of this. Whoops, I'll be able to type a little better than that. And then you could put a description here, and should flesh that out with a lot more detail, but we won't do too much of that tonight. So now let's talk about this node. What's the name of this node? Hold or sell distressed mortgages. The decision node, hold or sell distressed mortgages. Okay? Now, I happen to know what again, because this is a decision that's already been made, the description for this, and I'll type it in real fast. I'm not going to do this for too many of them, but just to show you how that works. Balance sheet managers need to determine whether a formerly distressed mortgage is performing well enough to be sold to investors. There's more to it than the description that the student used, but that's enough for right now, okay? Now, so we have this is our main decision. Everything's going to funnel into supporting how we make this main decision. Now, every once in a while, you want to go over here and hit save, of course. You can also see you can export this image, okay? You can edit the object. So if you go back to some other object, you can edit this one, okay? And then there's a few other things there. You can print and so forth. We'll come back and talk about that. You can delete the object. You can refresh the screen. I can zoom in and zoom back out and so forth. Okay, so I did that. Big deal, right? Now, I've got one decision in there, and I have to now decide, what am I going to do with this? How am I going to add to that? You certainly don't just say, here, make the decision. Well, what goes into that decision? Well, the student gave it a lot of thought. This was a student who knew a lot about the mortgage business, which is ideal. And so let's look at some of these decisions that come under this one. Again, the things that are in rectangles are decisions where you have to make those first before you can make this decision. One is evaluate the probability of selling the mortgage. Okay? So let's put another decision in. Drag that over. Edit it. Again, I'm not going to do this for all of them. You'll see in a minute. Evaluate the profitability, and selling a mortgage. In other words, I'm not going to sell them if I'm going to take a giant loss. Okay, that's the name of the node. And then you'd put a description in. You should have a description for all the nodes because, again, this would be a document you'd share within the organization. Now, we can move that around, of course, and we say, well, this decision has to be made before that one. So we want to connect those two. So you highlight the node you want to connect. Go over here. We have two ways of connecting. This connects an expertise or authority requirement. This connects an information requirement or a decision that needs to be made before another one. Double-click that. Come over here to the middle. You see that little brown or gray thing in the middle, and just drag up there. There, it's connected. That tells you that this decision supports this one. This one has to be made first. Now, I could go through, as you know, this is a pretty large diagram, and of course, the student created this by putting some things in, thinking about it, coming back. You can either work laterally or vertically. Maybe you'd like to get all your decisions out there, all your decisions, and then figure out how they're connected. Maybe you just like to work a little piece at a time, like, okay, I've got this this piece, now what supports that? And maybe you'd like to work in depth and do that. Either way is fine. In any case, you have a choice. You can certainly go and create your objects one at a time like I've done so far, or you can do this thing called bulk create. You might find the bulk create very useful, you might not. It's up to you, but I'll tell you what it does. Bulk create lets you bring objects in bulk. Now, where do they come from? Well, let me show you. This is an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, I'm sure everybody recognizes that. It happens to be in CSV, comma separated value form, and it only has 3 columns: object type, name, description. Object type, name, description. That's all it has. And it's a CSV. Now, the object type, these are specified by the program. You don't have any choice. So make sure if you're going to use bulk create, if it's a decision, you type decision. If it's what we used to call information source, has now been changed to input data. Knowledge source, those are the sources of expertise and regulations, etc. Then you can bring in these other objects: business objectives, process, events, system, organization. So some people like to go think about all the objects they're going to need. Whether you use them or not is up to you, but this will bring them into the program, and then give them a name and give them a description. And that way, when you import them, they'll all be available, and you won't have to do all the typing except in the spreadsheet. It's up to you. There's a couple of caveats, however. You'll notice on every one of my names at the end it says -SK. Remember, you're sharing a database with the other members of your class. So if I create a decision called hold or sell distressed mortgage, and someone else creates an object in that data set called hold or sell distressed mortgage, exact same typing, exact same words, they'll both come up, and I have to think about which one is really mine. There is a way to go in and say, just show my objects. You can do that. But I recommend, and most of the students have done this, you put some way of delineating which objects you created at the end. So SK, my initials, I put at the end of every one of these. So this is a set. It may not be a complete set. I can always add more. But this gets me started, gets me up and running. Okay? Now, in order to import that, you build it exactly the way I said. You save it as a CSV file. Make sure it's closed. I'm not going to save any more changes. Go back over here. I'm going to go to bulk create. And I'm going to tell it to bring in that file. Okay? Now, let's see if I can find it real fast, of course. Let's see, hold or sell distressed mortgages, demo objects 1. I think that's the one I was using. I should go make sure, I guess. Well, I'll bring it in. I better make sure. Hold on 1 second. Let me get back to my spreadsheet and see what file I was just recently using. Class demo 3. Browse. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I've got so many things on this. Class demo 3. No. There it is. class demo 3. Okay. And then I say upload, and it's uploading. Bulk creation successfully done. Okay. So now I have 3 tabs open. I have home, I have decision model, I have bulk creation. I'm done with bulk creation. I'll close that. Go back to decision model. So now, if I'm sitting here thinking, okay, I want to bring in one of those objects that I created. Let me go back and open this back up in my spreadsheet briefly. Okay. Okay, spread these out a little bit. Okay, suppose I say, I want to put this payment history. That's something I want to use. So I'm going to insert that. So I can search, and I can just type in payment, part of it, and hit enter. And it didn't always come up, all of them. So sometimes you have to hit all of them. And go by type. And sometimes you have to put in the whole word. Assess payment history. There it is. If I hover over it, you can see that's a decision. Assess payment history, SK. So I'm going to drag that over here. And now we have that. Okay. And again, if you go back to looking at the big model, there's assess payment history. It's down here. And it is a decision that has to be made before the evaluate the profitability can be made. So where does it belong? It belongs down here, right? And I can hook it up, go back to objects, say connect, right on the little gray dot, drag it up, boom, whoops, right on the little gray dot, oops, double click it, right on the little gray dot, there we go. Okay, and then you hit save and you're off and running. Now again, all of the objects you can drill down on, so let me drill down on this one a little bit, okay? There it is. When I double click it, or if you don't want to double click it, you can highlight it and say edit object. Either way will take you to the details. I put in what? All I put in was the name, and all I put in was a description. Well, there's probably a lot more than that belongs there. First of all, what type of decision is this? Well, this is an operational decision. What's the status level? It's in progress. There could be a URL, maybe, that details more about what this decision is. You can put that there. It automatically sort of finds the pieces it's hooked to and says, oh, it's involved in this part of the decision process. And it's certainly, that's the diagram. And if I scroll down further, there's some other things I can put in. For example, what's the specific question this decision is trying to answer? Well, how about something like, is the distressed loan able to be securitized and sold? Right? That's the thing we're trying to answer. And then you say, what kind of answers do you expect to get from this? Yes, no. What's the default? The default is no, or the default could be yes, depending on how you view it. Okay? And I can scroll down a little further and say something about the characteristics of this. Let's say its volume is medium. Happens quite often, but not, not every day. The complexity is high. There's a lot of stuff, as you see from that finished model. How about the variability? Well, variability, medium, repeatability, medium. This gives people who look at this, remember, you're going to be showing this document and maybe sharing it with a lot of collaborators. Right now, we're not. We're doing this individually. But if you had collaborators, measurability, we need to have how we can measure this. And then time, kind of have that. And then decision value decay. Now, that's a term that really means basically, is this a decision we have to make very, very quickly? We're moving towards real-time data or not. So you could say the value decay of this medium term. The value of this is medium term. The value decay of this is medium term, meaning it decays, but the value is more when you do it sooner. Once a distressed loan is identified as performing. etc. Whatever else you want to put, right? Okay. And then I can go back to my decision model and save. Now I've got this. So now, as you can see, we go through. Now I've put in decisions so far. Let's talk about some of the other objects we have to put in. You know, we want to have some information sources, don't we? Okay, so we can search, get rid of this, just hit enter, and you should get all kinds of stuff by type. But, you know, I want a decision, and of course I know the kind of decision I want. You would know to name your own decisions, but I'll go back to this. I'm going to put in an object that is an information source, market bid prices. In other words, what are people paying for these things? So market bid prices, there it is. Drag it over. You'll notice it is a info source. Why? Because of the oval. Of course, and we go back to our drawing, we know that that info source is connected to evaluate probability of selling mortgage. Okay, in other words, it's an input. It's something we need to know before we can evaluate this. So let's go to objects, double click, boom, connect. That tells me that this has some data that's going to feed into this. Okay. If you highlight this and say Edit Object, you get a different screen. Okay, first of all, there's the description which came right in from the bulk edit. And you can say what the data source is. Is it internal, external, is it pooled? You can say what the data type is. Is it structured or unstructured? Well, this one's probably structured. You can say who the owner is. This comes from Harry. Mary has this information. The complexity. Easy to read, comes right out of a Microsoft database. URL if you need it. This shows you where it is involved in the diagram. And then you can go back and actually specify the data set and so forth. So again, you get lots of details about the information. So close that. We don't need that anymore. We really don't need that anymore. We fleshed that out. So we're back to looking again at just two tabs. Home. Remember, that's where all this stuff is. All the stuff I've been working with. There's all the objects that were brought in. Okay. You can see who brought them in, how long they've been in there. So in your case, there'll be other people in your class creating objects for their use. There's your decisions, okay? If you go back and look at that drawing, you'll see there were 6 decisions in that. So again, you can work it either way. You can just sit and think and ponder. It should be a decision that you know something about, because you're going to have to be the one to decide what kinds of information, what kinds of knowledge, what kinds of expertise do I need to flesh this out. Now again, that's an information source right there. How about something like a expertise source or a regulation? Not an information source, not a decision, but we need to know it. For example, here's one, balance sheet management directives. So we got some management guidance about the balance sheet. In other words, we got to include that. So remember, we can search, or we could create the object from scratch, but we've already got it in our database. We can search on balance sheet. Just put a couple of the words in, and we usually get that. This little hat that looks like a hat, cap and gown from a graduation is in fact a knowledge source. If you hover over it, you can see which one it is. So I'll bring that in and put it up here about where it goes. And again, you notice the shape indicates that it is a knowledge source. Now, we want to connect the knowledge source because we're thinking ahead. Now, of course, we know the answer by looking at the diagram, but we're thinking, we say, that affects whether we hold or sell distressed mortgage, the guidance from our top level bosses. And since it's a knowledge source, we don't connect it with a hard arrow, we connect it with a dotted line. Okay, again, I'm just going back and forth between search and objects. So have it highlighted with the red pen, double click, go to the middle and drag it over. There you go. And again, save it. Now you have a diagram that's starting to flesh itself out. As with the other things, you could, of course, fill in lots of information about this. Where's a con? You can always leave comments and so forth. Okay, so there's always plenty of room to put information in. And you get used to this interface. I know it's a lot the first time you see it, but you get used to this interface pretty quick because there's not a whole lot that you need to do with most of the objects. Of course, you can move them around if you don't like your drawing too much. You can zoom in and out. Those are minor things. So now I'm starting to get a diagram. Okay? Now I could go through and flesh out the rest of this diagram, but I've already got it all built because I wanted to show you a couple more things. But, suppose you weren't sure about something. You said, I think I have a decision, but I'm not sure. That's what these sketch objects are. Now, I didn't import any sketch objects, so I'm going to build one over here. I'm going to say, let's call this Fed interest rate decisions. Let's say we think that might have an impact. That could have an impact, but I'm not sure. That's why we make it a sketch object. These are things, we can have sketch knowledge sources, we can have sketch information sources. We're not sure they belong in there yet. Now, flesh that out, and let's say later on you think, oh, that does belong. I think that does belong. I really think that's an important thing on whether we sell these interest rate. Well, you right-click and say create, and now it's a regular object. Okay? And then if I said that needs to be connected to selling the profitability, so I'm going to connect that. Double-click the arrow, come over here to the dot, connect it to where it goes. So you can see how, again, hit save. Remember, that's your save. That's your export to image. If you said, gee, I'd like to show this to somebody, just hit click, and you can save what you got as an image if you choose. And by the way, when you do your assignment, just to jump ahead a little bit, what you will do is have a few pages, double-spaced, to sort of explain your decision, explain your rationale. Then you will attach the complete ARD, Analytics Requirement Document. Remember, this is part of that. This is the Decision Requirements Diagram. The complete ARD is all of the information involved, including the details, and I'll show you how you get that in a minute. But you probably want to put a copy of your DR, Decision Requirements Diagram, your DRD, this thing, in that first 6 pages, just as a quick overview. Say, hey, I'm talking about a decision involving distressed mortgages. Here's the background of why this is important, blah, 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 blah. By the way, here's my final diagram. And then a little bit more about what you learned from this and insights. And now you're done with your, I think it's a 6-page double-spaced limit. And then you attach the entire ARD to that so that we as faculty can go through and look and see what you've done in great detail. Okay, so hopefully that'll become clear to you. But you can ask questions if it's not. We'll try to help you with that. Okay, so I could go on and on and on, adding things and stuff here and so forth, but basically those are the kinds of things. Remember, I did have other objects. So, there's other objects in here if you wanted to go look for those too. And they can be fed in as subsidiary kinds of things. When you get, and I don't want to get too much into this tonight, but when you get into some of the details of some of the decisions, there's a place to put other things in there, okay? All right, so we're going to stick with just the basics here tonight. If you double-click this and scroll down, you can get all the way down to, who in the organization owns it. Right here, what are the objectives, what are the KPIs, who owns it. Again, I don't expect that you can certainly learn everything in the short amount of time we have, but I think you can begin to appreciate the value of an approach like this. Okay, I'm going to save it one more time. We're 45 minutes in. I'm going to sign out for a minute, and I'm going to sign into the completed model, okay, because I want to show you the completed model. Okay, the completed model is a little in a different place. This should work, I hope. Let me see, I've got to get to the right model. I've got so many models in here. I think it's this one. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so this is that same model that I've been talking about, all completed. That's got all the stuff in there. Okay, you can see the tremendous linkage we end up with. Now, here is our model, our analytics piece, okay? This is our analytics piece. Now, again, since we're not building analytics models yet, there's not much you can do besides make sure you specify, that there is an analytics piece. So this is going to determine who the people, which mortgages are that are likely to turn into defaults. Performing loan model. It's going to assess each mortgage in our organization as they come in and say this is a 0.7 likelihood of staying performing or whatever. These are the mortgage payment records. Here's a property appraisal. That feeds into whether or not the mortgage can be sold. We have to assess home equity. You know, so the person that did this did an excellent job, very good job. You could always add more. I can think of a few things. But, you know, and they also put in a couple of key, you know, things that regulations, the FHA, you can see where it fits in the model and so forth. But, you know, those are extras. You know, you certainly want to drill down and flesh it out as much as you can. Okay. Let me go back and get this mortgage model back up. Now, let's say you've got it all done and you're ready to print it out. It's a little bit unusual the way it works. Again, this assumes that your faculty member has done his or her thing and done the API key. If it doesn't work, you may have to tweak them to say do it again. But basically, what you need to do is go over here and click Print All. Weird, but that's what already works. You hit Print All. It doesn't really print it. It says Print All Output Ready. Click on the Word button to download. Close. So now if you click on the Word button, it will download this, okay? And it's going to say that it's an XML file, but don't worry, it will open in Word. I'm going to call this distressed. It is -4, stress 4. So remember that name because that's what I'm going to open. Okay, now you say, well, where is it? All right, well, now I got to go to Word. Getting there. There we go. There's Word. I'm going to open it. You say, well, how's that going to work? Well, it does work. Okay, there's distress 4. Word can read. It's an XML Word file, so it'll come up here in a second. There we go. At least it's supposed to. There's my Word. Here we go. Here it is. Okay. There it is. Now, again, you need to shrink the diagram quite often because it's a little bit too big for the screen, but there it is. And now you can see starts with the decision nodes, okay, then the data source nodes, then the data source, knowledge, know-how, and so forth. And then it starts over with each of the nodes and the details. Now, if you had details, there they'd be. Okay, the answer type, the answers, the default answers, supporting information, et cetera, et cetera. So this is very detailed. So this is the thing you'll be attaching. This is the analytics requirements document, the finished ARD. Okay, you will be attaching that to your write-up. Your write-up is used basically to explain what it is you're doing and why it's important, why it meets this, insights you've gained, things you might add to it, whatever you'd like in that 6 pages double-spaced max that you have on the front end. Then your sources, of course, then this will be an attachment. Okay, so that allows you to basically do the entire document, see the entire document. And so now I want to go back to where I was and say, at this point, I'll address questions or concerns. There's only so much you can absorb at one time. Okay, so let me see if there are questions. I hope it's been relatively helpful. You need to get in and practice. You need to get in and start. If anyone has a question, you can go ahead and post it in the chat room, and I'll try to help answer if I can. Again, sometimes I have to go ask the people at DecisionsFirst myself. But if you have questions, if not, I'm gonna save this. Of course, you'll have this to go back and refer to. It'll be recorded. It's in WebEx, and you can either download and watch it offline, or you can go back and watch it in the WebEx recorder. And I will send you certainly the link to this. Okay. What business problem are we trying to solve? Ah, that's a very good question. You get to pick the business problem. It should be, ideally, it would be something in your organization that met the criteria. Repeatable, non-trivial, important to the bottom line, and possibly something you could automate. Ideally, if you knew something about a lot of decisions, maybe you're in a phone company and you know that, oh my gosh, we have to deal with customer churn. Or maybe you're in a company that has to worry about fraudulent transactions. Or maybe you're in a company, well, this person obviously worked for a company where they had to deal with whether or not to sell mortgage loans. And of course, that's a decision that's perfect, which is why it turned out so well. Some of you will obviously not have that situation. You'll say, I'm not really in a business where I have a decision that comes to mind, but I want you to give it some thought, because ideally it would be something from your organization. Now, if not, then you're going to have to pick sort of one of the standard kind of things. You could pick something like customer churn and do some research. What kinds of things go into making a decision on customer churn? Think about it and read about it. There's a lot of ways to find information about that online and elsewhere. What kinds of aspects do you think go into that? First of all, what kind of information sources do you need? What kind of an analytical model do you need? What kind of expertise sources do you need? And then start piecing those together and think it through. So I do have a chart. And I'll put it up on the screen. Move you all out of the way. This is a chart that says what kind of decisions can predictive analytics help with. Now, some of these are ideally suited because they're repeatable and so forth. How do I know if my customer is likely to miss payments? How do I know if I'm pricing myself out of a market? How likely is this customer going to be involved in future claims? So you can see there's some in the insurance, communications, retail, horizontal. Not all of them are ideally suited for this kind of decision, but many of them are. Okay, you can see, how do I detect the likelihood of fraud takes place? This is a healthcare one. How do I optimize hospital spaces and patient turnaround? How do we improve treatment plans? Again, the decisions should be operational, not strategic. You should not be building a decision-first model that says we want to look at whether or not to move our organization to China. That's not a decision you make often. It's not a decision that's necessarily repeatable. I mean, it may be, but certainly not highly repeatable. So you're trying to find decisions that you can, meet the criteria you need to have that we've talked about, and that's important. So think about it, work on it. Here's somebody works for your judicial branch. Any suggestions? Well, first you think about it for a few days, and I'll think about it too. I'm sure there are the kinds of decisions in a judicial branch where you have to decide every day. You have to make a decision about something that impacts the bottom line. I can't think of it right this second, but there certainly should be something very good there. So again, yes, there's some work to be done to come up with the right kind of decision. But remember, we're only giving you a couple of weeks. You can only do so much. Obviously, the greater depth, the better. The greater detail, the better. But there's only so much time and effort you can put into it. But I want you to learn to appreciate the software, so I want you to get in there and work on it. Because I think, again, if you said, and remember, when this is all done, some of the things I didn't show you was you can attach it to an organization chart. You can put other people on the hook to provide it. Under the remarks, whenever you put an expertise in, you can say, this comes from Mary, this comes from Tom. So when you get all done and have that finished ARD, Analytics Requirement Document, that should be like a contract that says, okay, guys and gals, this is what we're attempting to do. This is the decision we're attempting to make. This is the kind of information we need to make it. These are the kinds of sources of expertise. This is where we're going to get our information. These are our KPIs, all of that. And once you've got that, then you've got a good chance of having a successful analytical model. Whereas if you don't, you just say, well, let's just go see what we can find in the data or something like that. It's really not going to work because, again, you'll have a very unstructured, no taskings delegated to anybody kind of assignment. That's not going to work. So again, I think you need to give it a shot and try. Think about a decision that makes sense in your organization, or some decision you're interested in that you can do some research on. It should work. The length of the paper, again, I think we set a max of 6 double-spaced pages. Now, I don't really think you need that much. I made it a max because people always say, oh, I couldn't possibly squeeze what I've got to say in there, and I'm saying, yes, you can. The max means, that's the part for explaining what it is you're doing. That's not the ARD. The ARD, again, one more time, I'll mention the analytics requirement diagram. The thing I showed you that was printed out is an attachment, an appendix to your document. So your write-up is basically introducing what your decision is, why you picked it, why it meets the criteria, and then maybe a little section on caveats or things you learned. Whatever, we leave a little slack in there because this is a graduate school and we don't try to prescribe exactly every single step. But you should look at the assignment guidance in your assignments area. It's rather detailed. You should look at the rubric we're going to be using to grade it. It's rather detailed. And so that should give you a good feel for the format and the structure of the paper. And I think it says 6 pages, double space, max, which would be about 3 pages, single space. So, not that much. But, you need to explain a little bit. Because if I just look at the ARD and see the decision, I have to think about it. Because remember, there's a wide swath, a wide variety of kinds of decisions that fit into this. Good question. Okay, we've used up almost our entire hour. I didn't want to go much past an hour. I hope this has been helpful to you. Again, it's being recorded, so it certainly will be available to you. I'll post the link just as soon as I have it, which will be within the next hour. I'll post it in my section, 9040. I'll send it to the other faculty, and they can post it in their sections. I'll also send the view graphs that I used tonight, so you can have those. And again, if you have other questions, we'll certainly try to answer them for you. Sometimes the questions have to go to, as I said earlier, if the question, gee, the software is doing something funny, send those to support@decisionsfirst.com. They are very good at providing support, so they're very helpful. Anything else? Okay, well, I think we had pretty good turnout here. Again, I know it was recorded, so it was up to people who wanted to and could attend live. So I'm going to go and stop sharing my screen. That's the first thing I'll do. Then I will go, of course, and stop the recording, so we make sure that works okay.